So let's introduce ourselves in case my
Do
people don't know you, your people may not know me, and
Very
yeah,
true. Very true. Do you want to go first, Chitra, then?
sure. So my name is Chitra, and I'm a doctor of Ayurveda, specializing in women's health. But as an ancient medicine practitioner, deal with everyone and everything. But I came to working in women's health specifically and menopause because I discovered that this is an underserved, undernourished population, and in the Ayurvedic world as well as in the medical fields. I remember sitting in class and we were talking about women's health, and Ayurveda has a big lexicon in terms of women's health, and a lot of the beginning parts of when they actually go into dealing with disease and or more nuanced things. They're talking about women's health, and specific how to raise a healthy child. Therefore, you have to have healthy mommies for healthy babies, and of course, healthy dads. Um, but once that was done, then it's we're in geriatrics, you know.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be, and that's because it also is a field where men have dominated, and women's voices have been not expressed, lost, frustrated, on and on and on. We can go over there. So I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and what else? Okay, little fun fact that I have, just outside of Ayurveda, I have four cats. There's a fifth one that's trying to come in, and maybe a sixth. Yesterday was a day, and I love science fiction, and lately I've been watching the Great British Baking Show a lot because I can't stand to watch to see anything else. Your turn.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yay. Wow. So it's me. Well, I'm Clarissa, and I'm an Oriental medicine practitioner focused on Chinese medicine. And within that, I really am doubling down on Qigong and its wholeness. So, for those of you who may be less familiar with that, that includes not just movement, but a lot of acupressure, Reiki type healing, sound healing are all encompassed within what Qigong is in a medical perspective. And also, I work with Chinese dietary therapy, which is a very individualistic type of nutrition and using food both as kitchen medicine, which I love that inside your kitchen there is wonderful things, but also more tailored diets according to you as an individual. And I came into women's health about 8 years ago because I was working with women, teaching Qigong, teaching mindfulness meditation. And there was a sort of just a plethora of women who were always in this midlife. They were really bumping up against common issues. And I thought, well, what's the common thread here? Oh, it's menopause, perimenopause. But we weren't talking about that as much in the Western world 8 years ago. It seems like we're talking about it all the time now. But then we weren't. And of course, when you look back in ancient Chinese texts, they've been talking about this time of life for the 3,000 years that it's written down, which means it's gone thousands of years before that. And there's been an emphasis, like in Ayurveda, a really rich understanding of women's health and a big emphasis on longevity. That's a big part of Chinese medicine, that we should be able to live longer well. They used to say ancients lived to 100 with no problem at all, and then we went and messed it all up. So there's a rich history of this, and what is colloquially known as a second spring, which has really emerged as as a sort of conversation or a label today, but that is a lot of that of our journey of our life is leading us to this second spring when we become wiser elders. And so the journey through perimenopause and menopause is a big part of that. So that really has become my specialism. And when I work with Qigong and the physical side of it, I specialize in women's Qigong and not in everybody, even though I can do everybody Qigong, but I work with specialists there because we're different. And some of the movements and the way we approach things just need to be done in a different way, partly because a lot of our strength comes from the heart. This is our strong center as women, but it's not one we take as much care of. So there's a lot of emphasis on the lower energy centers, but in women's Qigong, we work here at the heart. And so that's my passion. When I'm not working, I'm quite into politics. I like listening to political podcasts. That's what I do in the evenings. But like politics, not from so much the Western world, but what's going on in the rest of the world. What's happening out there that can impact us and that we could make a difference to as well. So that's what I really like chilling out and listening to, as well as I'm a bit into cooking. So baking is a minor hobby, but it can appear from time to time. Yeah.
Wonderful. So let's talk about how this is our introductory one. So and I see Shelley just joined. Welcome. Let's just talk about how this came to be and what we're thinking of doing with this art and heart of menopause. I thought it was just so cool that we happen to have very similar Substack titles. And yeah, let's just talk a little bit about that and what we plan to do with this.
Yeah, I think we were sort of watching each other's writings and notes and feeling, oh, this is a lot of similarity of the way we think, that this is a really powerful time of our lives, that a time that we can have a lot of impact in, that there's so much more, that we're not just a body, we're a mind and we're a soul, that we have the ability to take far more control of this time of life. And then we just started chatting a bit on messages, and we got together and we realized we had a lot aligned and some differences, because Ayurveda and Chinese medicine do have differences, but together they might make a really great whole. So that's really, I think, how this was born. If you want to add more to that, Chitra. Yeah.
Well, exactly. That's exactly how it was born. I've always, Chinese medicine and Ayurveda are so connected. And I think I said this to you. There's a legend in Ayurveda, and it's actually in our first, one of our first major texts called Charaka, where they are talking about discussions between doctors, indigenous doctors, from or healers from all over the world. And the legends is that, now I know Chinese practitioners will say the opposite, but uh,
We always came first.
um, the legend is that this kind of practice with the different Mahabhutas, translate elements, moved from the Indian continent, subcontinent, whatever you want to call that, and it moved outwards, and it went from India, probably northern India rather than southern India, through Tibet and out towards China. And through some of the other islands, also into Greece, also into the Arabian peninsulas, and so on and so forth. So there are so many things in common, but what had to happen as the understanding moved, and Ayurveda means the science of life or the wisdom of life, and it's all about longevity as well. The underpinnings had to change because the environment changed. So when it went from northern India to Tibet, well, they didn't have very many vegetables. So So they had to include a lot more meat and whatever other herbs and environmental factors that they had to deal with. And also the psychology of the people were different. And as it kept moving outward into China, it incorporated Chinese cultural understandings and what they also brought into those conclaves.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really interesting, just for a context here, that Tibet is a very great center for women's healing practices. A lot of the practices I teach are actually Tibetan, not
Really?
Chinese. Yeah, so I teach a lot of the sound work that I teach is Tibetan in origin, and its focus, it's kind of sound and movement as around our breasts and our womb area comes from Tibet. And also some of my massage techniques that involve sort of pressing the meridians, they're Tibetan in origin rather than Han Chinese, which and it sort of there binds us that maybe that sort of central northern India Tibet is joined.
Possibly. I love this. I get to learn something new too. So let's talk about the topic today.
Hmm.
And the topic today really, and feel free to ask any questions if you're listening in. I'm monitoring the chat, so I'll be able to see that. But the topic today is kind of very, very simple, and it's one that's really important, and it's the importance of preparing for menopause. You told me a story about one of your clients recently. Would you love to share that?
Oh, yes. Well, I had a client who approached me and said that she wanted to work with me. And I think that a lot of people I meet feel like they're parachuted into perimenopause. It's like we've gone along and suddenly, oh, this thing has arrived, as if it arrived out of nowhere. And when I sort of suggested that, even at her age, at 30, I think she was 37 and having just had her first child, that she should start preparing for perimenopause. And there was quite a lot of shock. So what do you mean? I've just had a child, it's not possible. But I said, well, actually, according to the Chinese medicine system, this is exactly the time that you should start preparing for perimenopause. And we'll talk probably more about the women's life cycles as we have our conversation. But essentially, Chinese medicine does dedicate about 21 years to the preparing, going through, and recuperating from perimenopause, which when I say that to people here, they're going to go, it's a very long time. I thought it was going to be over in 2 or 3 years. But I think it is the importance of the either side, the preparing and the really assimilating, reflecting, recuperating phase that are equally as important. But today we are going to talk about preparing, which
Yeah, I want to emphasize this understanding of that preparation is that preparation really starts way, way early from your first menses, really.
yeah.
Um, and in Ayurveda, we have these rejuvenative practices that we add every set 10 years, in addition to our um, regular practices that we do on a daily basis, which we call dinacharya. And so every single cycle of a woman is a time to prepare for perimenopause. So for instance, if there's PMS, if you want to get pregnant, postpartum, your postpartum care is is extremely important in how menopause, perimenopause is going to affect you, how aging is going to affect you, because in the end, if you have a bad perimenopause, you're also going to have a more difficult time aging. So we
Mm.
all know that the body's going to deteriorate. We're not talking about graceful aging, and stopping the aging process. But it happens from the moment we're born. We are aging, and at a certain point in time, the body starts deteriorating, which is why Ayurveda emphasizes a lot on the rejuvenation practices. But we start aging, and every time there's a hit to the body or a big change, those are times where cracks can happen. Those are it's like a in a street, you know, when you start having the pool of water and then all of a sudden the concrete goes and you've got this pothole. Well, this pothole is going, it doesn't matter. It's just going to get deeper and deeper if you don't deal with it. And even if you do just kind of fill it in later on, it's still not as sound as it was before. So back to the aging process, it's a matter of how steep the decline is going to be. I personally want my decline to be as not steep at all.
Gradual, gentle, I think.
Gentle, gradual. I can deal with a lot of things, and you know, I do wake up in the morning with like, oh, that's interesting. That's never been a feeling before, you know. But yeah, so it's not about, yay, I'm happy, I'm wonderful, I'm completely pain free and feeling like I'm in my 20s, but it's a happy way to go rather than having to suffer the entire time.
And that's where Ayurveda is very similar to Chinese medicine. I mean, Chinese medicine has this concept that we have 7 times 7 year cycles. They begin when you are 7 and sort of end when you're in your mid-50s. I mean, give or take, and we're not exact on years, but also that we have 3 golden opportunities, that we have puberty as a time to really reset. We're going menses being important, the postpartum incredibly important period for reset. And particularly, I was just reading the other day, and this was new to me, that if you have your children according to Chinese medicine later in life, you need a much longer postpartum recovery than if you were to have a child in your 20s. And of course, nowadays we're delaying this into our 30s. And so that becomes really quite critical. And there was even a statement from this very well known acupuncturist that we need about 5 years postpartum recovery. We need to focus on those recovery practices for so long so that we have a smoother menopausing, if we like. And that also that, you know, here we are and preparing, because it's all the same. We want the jing, the essence, this part of ourselves that is almost like who we are, to last as long as it can. It declines from the minute you're born, but we can preserve it by the way we act throughout our lives, how much we take care of ourselves, how much sort of stopping and reflecting where we're at, so that the jing sort of gradually declines and fades away. Because otherwise, you know, we reach aging and some of the issues of aging, and the menopause can feel very sharp if our jing is severely depleted. So what happens before we get to this stage of life is really important. How we live our life and how we reset regularly every 7 years, but particularly after those events of beginning our menses and even more so postpartum.
Yeah, and that's part of the tragedy of modern life is that women are forced to choose between independence, independent, like making a living for themselves and getting educated, and having a child. So because your career is not the time of the career happens to be at the same time, the optimal time, as the optimal time for childbearing. In reality, our childbearing can happen a lot earlier than we also want to have in our society. Um, but there's this social construct that we have not yet been able to reconcile with the biological functioning. So 30s is actually, at least in the United States, having a child is almost on time. We're seeing a lot of women having children in their 40s.
Yeah.
So this is this conflict between childbearing and perimenopause is huge.
Mm.
And no wonder women are depleted, because the body is confused. It's doing two different things. It's preparing to decline, and yet at the same time it's preparing for new life, when that should have happened decades earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Or we have it, or we're in the recovery of having had our child, and then the body starts going, no, it's time to be preparing for this inevitable decline. It doesn't mean that it's all over. I mean, I think, but we are losing some of those energetic properties that we had as younger women, and that, we get other things. In Chinese medicine, you lose your jing every time you menstruate. So actually, after we've gone through menopause, it's yay. I'm not losing as much jing at all. I am actually in a better position to preserve it in some ways if I take care of myself. But I think it's also the way that we live our lives. It's always been identified in the Chinese texts very much that there were four key factors that really contributed to the setting ourselves up. And the first was how much overworking we were doing. And I mean, we could talk about that all day here, that overworking, just exhausting ourselves. And I don't think I meet anybody that doesn't feel exhausted, is a major issue for as we go into perimenopause. Overthinking was the other one, and I think we can talk about that a lot. There's just this sheer mental effort that women have, not just at our jobs but or our social media, but the amount of emotional labor that women do. We're picking up all the stuff that is thinking, did the child go to the dentist? Has the dog taken its worming tablet? Things that men don't take on board into their lives. And then it was inconsistent good nutrition. It doesn't mean that we don't know, because I think most of us know what a good diet should look like, but we are inconsistent. And then the fourth big strand that could impact us was that we indulged in alcohol and caffeine and other practices that are very depleting for us as women. And those were seen as some of the areas, particularly as we come into these late 30s, that we could begin to address in different ways.
So I have a question for you. I'm trying to translate Jing
Yeah.
into Ayurvedic terminology.
Ah.
And in Ayurveda, we're looking at the loss of ojas, tejas, and prana. So, so these three things are the higher, more subtler elements of vata, pitta, and kapha. So prana, it is out of the air. It's the life force breath element, right? So every time, yes, we're losing some of that. Tejas is that fiery element. So it is purified, transformative energy, right? And so that's what gives women the brightness. So when you're young, you're glowing, and later on we have to work at that glowing a little bit, right?
Yeah,
And
we
then
do.
ojas is this. So tejas is like the higher element, the more subtle element of pitta, and ojas is the more subtle element of kapha. Now, ojas is the juice. If I would put it in English terms, it's the juiciness of a woman, right?
Mm.
So it's the immunity. It's what gives us the joy and fulfillment in life and in everything around us. So my question is I'm trying to figure out where Jing is, or if it's a completely different term than any of those three.
I think that it kind of is. Jing is the kind of essence of who you are who. You know, it comes from your parents. You are allotted a certain amount of Jing from birth. That's your Jing. It comes that way. It's very much what makes you you. And of course, you pass a little bit of your Jing on to your children. So it's our ancestral link. It's what makes us bright. It's what makes us us, how strong we are constitutionally as well in the Chinese medicine terms. Some people have weaker Jing than others. It's just the way they're constructed. And it's our kind of essence of life. Yeah, that's our, but we also have qi and shen. So qi is the energy, the spark, the brightness. So I would say jing is a little different, but there are elements of the Ayurvedic in it. Then we have qi. Qi is your energy that flows through your body, that works on your mind and your spirit. And then we have the shen, which is more the soul part of you. Which is who you are on more of a soul level. So Ayurvedic Chinese medicine is also concerned with preserving Jing, making sure the qi is flowing, and that you cultivate this heart-centered side of yourself.
Yeah, Gitika said in the chat that it seems familiar, similar to her, to the two systems. I think that the Jing is probably closer to Ojas than any of the other two that I had mentioned. Okay, cool. That's
Now we, yeah.
well, that's part of, my motivation to having these chats is so that we can understand these different methodologies and bring them together, and eventually even having another methodology brought in. And so let's discuss it. It's like like when you had your podcast, you
Yeah.
told me early on that you were what's the words, blinded by the medical reductionist
Mm.
system, when it came to menopause, when you thought that they were coming from a holistic perspective, right?
Oh yes, yeah. That was a good. I mean, I had my podcast, and I set it up to be a holistic lifestyle podcast. I had it for a number of years, and initially we had, a lot more people who were open to a holistic approach. But then with time, people would come in and say, "Well, yes, I'm talking about this," and then halfway through, they'd say, "All women have to take hormone therapy," and I'd be like, "What? What? What are you talking about?" Or all women have to have all these supplements. So there were these kind of, absolutes that came into the conversation that really kind of sideswiped me, which is one of the reasons I don't do the podcast now, because I found it that all the time that this was coming through, and there was a certain narrative being driven down here, and we lost some of the holistic. We'd lost that menopause is, yes, physiological, but it's also about your mind, your emotions, and your soul, because that you're on a soul journey. Certainly in Chinese medicine, we are on a journey from body to soul. And maybe at 65, I think I'm heading more into soul now, but that is the journey that we are very body focused as we are young. As we go through menopause, we move more, but somewhere even later, we become more about the soul. We become less about me, look at me. We become more about us. We become more internal, and we become, though the body is weakening, the soul becomes strong.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And this is why anytime you read about anything about midlife, it's like, I don't care anymore about what other people say. And that's really that transition between focus on the outer world and returning into the inner world. So we've digressed a little bit from
We have from our
which
preparing,
is
but
what
maybe we could come back to the importance of preparing, because I think we are saying, Chitra, that we're not parachuted into this time. And I think that's why the conversation about things like Jing are quite important, and similar in the Ayurvedic side. because these are things we want to try and take a hold of, keep, preserve, go down slowly. And if we get to the perimenopause, if we are hitting, our early 40s, mid 40s, and we've depleted so much of that earlier thing, we are going to have a more challenging time, and the need to prepare, not just as at each stage or postpartum, that we are very conscious about setting ourselves up for a perimenopause the best we can. We are going to, in Chinese medicine terms, Jing's declining, and you will see what we call a yin deficiency. We will lose some of that grounded feminine energy, and that's part of the journey as well, that we see a weakening in the yin. So we need to preserve and work on how we don't end up, because the yin deficiency shows up in normal symptoms, or what in Chinese medicine would be normal symptoms. We are drier, we are a bit hotter, we're a little bit more agitated, we have some disruptions, but those are manageable. But when we haven't prepared and managed, that's when things get out of hand. There's too much indeficiency, and we see other organ systems in Chinese medicine, it's severely impacted, like the liver, very important for our sleep, for our moods. Anger lives in the liver, irritability, sleeplessness, and we see issues with our digestion, our anxiety, and there often is a disconnect between what's known as the kidney system, which is obviously the reproductive and other systems, and the heart. And when those connections in the body doesn't talk to each other all as it should, then we find ourselves in many of the more expressed symptoms of menopause. I can't sleep, I'm anxious, I'm irritable, I've got IBS, all those things that we maybe meet because of a lack of preparation and a body that is essentially imbalanced on other levels than just the hormonal change.
Yeah, and this is where I think the approach of Ayurveda it differs from Chinese medicine. And I know that Chinese medicine, when you speak liver, you're not speaking specifically this large organ that's sitting in, on the right side of the body that filters the blood. And we're not talking about that. You're talking about a completely different system. In Ayurveda, we are, when it comes to menopause and and these different systems, we're looking at what is the word in Ayurveda is dhatu, which has been translated into tissues, and so there are 7 tissues, and when we and each tissue is formed. This is going back to your 49 days, right? Each tissue gets nourished. That this is one of the theories around how food becomes nutrition and becomes the actual tissues every 7 days. So it takes 49 days from food to go from the first tissue to the last tissue. The last tissue made is the male and female reproductive system. And since I'm seeing an Earl here, I'm assuming there's a male here. So I want to say something. Thank you for coming, and appreciate you being here and listening to our menopause talk. We need everyone. We're not exclusive, but I wanted to say that when you were talking about losing the feminine aspect later on in life, well, the men also lose the male aspect, and we become a lot more androgynous in older age. But women have gone through so much more on their body that it just needs a lot more rejuvenation. So back to the tissues. Um, so the first tissue that is created, that is made, is rasa, which is lymph, basically, or it's a type of a blood, but it's mostly lymph, I would say. And well, yeah, it's hard to put it into physiological terminology. It's a cross between blood and lymph. Let's put it that way. And the highest form of this is your menstrual blood. So when when we lose that, it's also we're losing pieces, we're losing energetics, we're losing ojas from the 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 sexual tissue, you know. And the physical tissues that we look at are the breasts and the uterus and menstrual fluids. But the menstrual fluid is very much connected to that initial part. So, and what that means is that rasa has to continuously flow. And in order, whether it's flowing out of the body or it's cycling through the body, it constantly has to flow, as well as it doesn't have its own system of moving. So we need to do certain practices in order to help it move. If it moves, then the rest of the tissues get nourished, right? And so those practices so when we look at lymph, let's say, and it has to get cleaned and all of those kinds of things. When we look at lymph, what do we need to do? Well, we've got to use our muscles, right? We have to do some sort of exercise, and we have to turn upside down in order for the lymph to return to the heart. I mean, it's a very manual system in a sense. We can do massage, in a very light massage, in order to do that. And all of those practices, as we allow for the flow, which is your chi, right? We do that. But each of the differences is that in Ayurveda we don't see it so much as a depletion of that. You know, we see it more of either an excess or a depletion of all of the qualities that go into that rasa dhatu. And so when those pieces are not functioning properly, when we don't have the ability to digest, assimilate, eliminate, all of the things that go into the digestion, then the rest of the tissues won't happen so well, which means eventually the liver will be affected, right? But yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that sounds very, very, very logical, actually. To see that like that. I think here we see that, well, each of the organs are yin and yang, and then of course they have sub organs and senses. But we see this, more and more. What I see is that women have a yin deficiency and they have a yang deficiency, which is, or used to be very rare, but isn't. I think so. What I see is kidney yin deficiency, which is the classic symptoms of perimenopause and just around menopause. You know, the heat, the tired, the dryness, which we might expect. But we also see the fatigue, the low mood, and that's a yang deficiency. And then what I see is kidney liver disharmony, and in the liver, the definite lack of sleep. So there is a big emphasis on food being very important here, the diet and the preparation of a diet that really, really connects and helps us to eliminate with the liver, keep the liver in function. The importance of when we eat and how we eat all come into play. And that's hard because many women are rushing. They're used to rushing when they're young, not eating breakfast, me too, not eating breakfast, living on cups of coffee. All of these things is not supporting the system. And I think that's when we're coming into perimenopause. We need to think, am I trying to, and we're going to probably talk about Chinese medicine clock another time, as we don't really have time to even talk about that and the similar Ayurvedic one, but how we actually eat according to our body's clock needs and our own unique imbalance needs. Well, we need to start working on that in the run up to perimenopause. We need to move. Exactly, hanging upside down, we'll hear it's slow movements that ground, that support the yin energy, that are so Tai Chi, Qigong, obviously, but yoga too fit in that space. And that we really need to dial back on some of our overthinking and overworking. And this is where boundaries and all of those things that aren't directly about what we eat and what we do, but how we show up in the world really matter. And if we are more, no, I need rest, not just self care, I need rest, I need time. This is a depleting time for the body. We need to start doing that a lot sooner than we do, because it's so much harder if we do, because if we are depleted in Jing and we don't do these practices and the body goes through a big change, then perimenopause and the early stages of menopause will feel very hard, very, very hard. So it's really important for us to put in place good practices. And of course, Chinese medicine would say taking the right type of herbs and also specific acupuncture points to help balance the body. And that's different for different people. So we don't make generalized statements. But if we have good base lifestyle practices and we're taking supportive herbal remedies that are right for us and our individual constitution, then what we will see is that you need some, but not lots of acupuncture. So we don't need acupuncture all the time. I mean, when I did the menopause training, what it was, you could have acupuncture maybe once every three, a small course, maybe only every once every 3 months or even longer periods, because you're supporting the rebalancing of the body through the way you live your life.
Yeah. So, and we can like, there's so, this is why we can do this week after week after week for hours and hours and hours. And we kept stopping ourselves from talking whenever we got connected because there's just so much. But I wanted to give a little plug here for both of us. If you've enjoyed this, please subscribe. And I am, let's see if that doesn't work. I don't know why. Do you have your Substack easy to access?
No, I don't have my Substack easy to access, but I am, if you look for me, I'm Heart of Menopause.
Okay, great. And I am Art of Menopausing. If you're on a computer, I think you have an easy, um, there's a button that will subscribe to both of us. Let's see if I can do that. Hi, Rhiannon. Okay, that's mine, but it doesn't, just click that in. And this is Clarissa's.
Oh, here I
And
am. Yeah.
okay,
Yes. There we are.
doesn't have
That's
the
us if
actual
people.
link though.
Yeah.
Yikes. Um,
Maybe we should ask people if they had some questions too.
I think that's a great idea. If anyone has any questions, please stop, put it into the chat. And I'm going to do this in the middle here because we just want to have a little plug here for the work. Hi, Rhiannon. Almost forgot. Sorry. Wanted to see you.
That's nice.
That's fabulous.
Really like that.
Oh, no. Vacuuming water out of your basement. Where do you live?
Where do you? Oh my goodness.
Okay,
Where is
let's give her some quick tips of what to do if there's
water in our
water in the
basement? Oh my,
basement.
she's in Minnesota. Oh my goodness, she has water in her basement. I don't know. Just pump it
So,
up. My goodness.
so with water, we're talking kapha, and bad kapha turns into like fungal stuff. So yes, vacuum the
Yeah.
water out of the basement.
And let
Just
it
this morning,
dry.
let it dry. Just this morning, I was thinking to myself, this is completely off topic, off of menopause, but it's part of health. Um, oh, we'll get to you, Geetika, in a second. Um, the so I got some mulch from a tree company for free, which is yay. I live in the desert. So anything I can do to help the soil is really helpful. So I had this giant mound, it's like 5 yards of
Oh,
chopped wood sitting in my yard, and I'm this is my exercise right now, is wheelbarrows. And and there's all this green dust coming, and I was like, this morning I really need to wear a mask, because even though it's good microbes for the soil, it's not so good microbes for my lungs.
no, no.
So Rhiannon, please make sure that you're drying that out using um get
Yeah.
fans in there, do what you need to do in order to dry it
Stagnant
up,
water. Mm-mm.
because right now we have a huge problem with fungus and um, mold and all of
Yeah,
those kinds of things, and that, that is one of the things that I'm constantly saying. Let's look also at underlying symptoms when perimenopause occurs, because we have to address those things too. It's
we
not
do.
all about, the liver. It could be the lungs. It could be a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, it could, and I think that's true because each of us is an individual. We have our own individual, what I call a constitution, where we are at in our life stage. And it's really important that before you run around and self medicate or do anything, hate herbs that come off a pill in a shop. Sorry, folks, I just do. Um, it's good to work with a practitioner who can give you the diagnosis so that you get the right diet, the right herbal medicines, the right treatment for you, so that you progress. Because as Chitra rightly said, lots of other underlying things are also can be going on, and they need as much to be worked on as just the hormonal change. But of course, they can interact with each other and cause other issues. So it is really important as part of this preparation for perimenopause that is part of the work we do.
Yeah. So Gitika I've always been, when I first started working with perimenopause, I did not realize how many women have the same issue that Gitika had mentioned. She said that she had a hysterectomy at 48. Her ovaries were left intact. Never knew when she went into menopause. Any insight? As soon as you have a hysterectomy, you're in menopause. Period. End of story.
Mm, Even though Western medicine would say if your ovaries were intact, that wasn't true. I think that it's changed the system. You've changed. Part of you is no longer here, and we need to take a different approach.
Yes. And so even though you're not going through the traditional Western understanding of the estrogens
Mm,
modulating progesterone, testosterone, you're not dealing with each of those. You've still gone into this phase,
mm,
because the all of the parts of your reproductive system are factored in
yes,
to
yes,
peri and post menopause.
yes, yes. Like,
Yeah. Rhiannon says they consider it surgical menopause if your ovaries are
that's
removed.
correct. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. And then it's kind of like the system is, and then you're in. Then it's like an instant.
Yeah.
There's no perimenopause. It's just
So how do we handle that? So what you want to do is,
mm,
first, from an Ayurvedic perspective, and I'm sure it's a similar thing in Chinese medicine, is you want to manage the healing from the surgery itself.
Yeah.
So in Ayurveda, anytime you cut the body, right, that is a vata thing. So you're going to have dry, rough, cold. The body is automatically going to bring in the other two doshas, meaning it's going to bring in pitta, which is inflammation of sorts. What inflammation is it's bringing blood and nutrients into that wound, so that and along with the blood comes the immunity, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's too hot, but the immunity is kapha. Sometimes it's too hot, so it brings in also kapha. So all three of the doshas are coming in to help heal the wound. Um, if and then a scarring happens.
Yeah.
And so whenever there's a scarring, that means lack of movement. So the body is trying to deal with all of those um, all of those things at once. So what we want to do as practitioners and as those who've experienced any surgery is to also, this is my cat who's walking back and forth. She knows more about Sanskrit and Ayurveda than I ever have, because she sat in on every single thing, book, whatnot. Um, so we want to really help the body heal. We want to step back and not do more things. We want to do less things. We want to focus on allowing it to do that, and to create more normal tissue rather than
Yeah.
scarred tissue.
And I think from a Chinese medicine perspective, rest and recuperating, which would be the seventh of the 7 year stages, we miss that sixth stage almost. It sort of gets skipped over. A lot of need of nurturing the yin energy, because that will really have been almost depleted away. So a need to nurture a lot of herbal things that help the body feel moisturized. Dong Quai is a very common herb that's usually quoted. Herbs are very rarely in Chinese medicine given alone. They're given in combinations because they work and counterbalance each other, which is why the Materia Medica is 200 plus plates is a crazy number. But so you get the right kind of formulas. So you're nurturing to nourish the body, to moisturize the body, to cool the body, and put yourself back into a more sort of balanced state. Massages in the womb area, because although the womb area it's been removed, the soul of it is still present. So a lot of massage and sound healing work around that area and around what's called the belt meridian that runs around the from the navel around the back, and making sure that we work with the kidney area in acupressure massage, so we look after the continual flow of fluids in the body as well. The kidneys look after water, and we call that part of the body snow mountain, and we don't want it to freeze on snow mountain. We want that to stay warmed. So there's a lot of daily practices around the kidney area, movement, massage, that help to keep that area warm and the chi moving, particularly when we have removed
Yeah.
the whole reproductive system.
I wanted to address uh, the the herb thing that you were talking about in terms of single herbs. Um, I totally agree with you. Um, and I'll get back to Geetika's response. Um, Ayurveda will do single herbs, but it's always with a particular vehicle of how deep into the tissues we want to go. But for the most part, we do formulas that have many herbs in it because we want to work with the intelligence of the body rather than what we think that the body needs.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah.
So, so we have formulas that are balancing and balanced and extra for that thing, and it's really a practice and an art in and of itself.
Mhm.
And herbs are not meant to be taken lifelong. Right.
Yep.
So herbs are there to help us with the intelligence of the body, to remind it of what it needs to do and to help it along if it doesn't
Yep.
have the tools it needs to do that. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree. That's in exactly the same way. It is an art. I'm not a herbalist. It takes at least 7 years to become, at least 7 years to become a half competent Chinese herbalist, probably decades. But being able to work with the herbs and their different relationships to each other to formulate what's right for that person where they are now is a real art. And you're right. This is not meant to be something we're meant to take lifelong or for long periods. Sometimes they act very fast. Sometimes their action is longer and slower. It just depends on what's needed. And then we move on. And I know I see people on places like Instagram saying, "Oh, take Don Kui." Well, it depends on you. I wouldn't recommend that as something you should just do, even though that's become popular in modern Western things to say things like that. And I see nutritionists saying that, and I'm saying, might not be right for your constitution. There are some herbal tonics that people take for longevity, for long periods of time, but they're like a tiny teaspoon, and they're quite mild in action. And that's where, if you want to take herbal benefits, kitchen medicine, using the herbs and things that are in your spices in your kitchen, is how you can get some of those benefits that can be medicinal in other forms day to day.
yeah, I think Dong Kui, I always called it Dong Quai, but I think that's the equivalent of ashwagandha,
Yeah.
where ashwagandha has become the superfood. And women are telling people to take it because it's reduced their stress and it's helped them sleep and it does all of those things. And I'm like, no, 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 don't put. And it's in everything right now. It's in
Yeah, it's
protein
in everything.
powders. It's in
It's in
everything. It's
everything.
become
Yeah.
the thing.
Well,
And
that's like he shu in Chinese. It's become this longevity thing, and I'm like, no, no.
and truthfully, what happens is I've seen more women have reactions to have more hot flashes from
Yeah.
it.
Oh,
Anyhow, so I
anyhow,
wanted to get
maybe
back
we
to
take
Geetika.
some. We take some back to Geethika and some questions, and then we might take. Should we take one more after Geethika?
Yeah.
Because we've
Um,
kept people an hour. Maybe they want to keep talking, but
they're hanging out. If they're hanging
they're
out, you
hanging
have
out there.
time. I'm happy. Um, so Geetika said, thank you. To clarify, the procedure was in 2018. It was successful, healed very well, was lucky to get time to rest. Fantastic. And so as a practitioner, as a doctor of Ayurveda, my first question would be, and you don't have to answer this, my first question would be not so much about menopause, but what was the underlying cause of having to have the hysterectomy? So that would be the first question that I would be asking myself. And we would probably get some sort of allopathic um, response to it. And whatever that allopathic response would be, I would go back to the doshas. I would go back to the tissues. I would go back to all of the what you're saying, stress, and I would go back to all of these fundamental qualities to see if the individual has done all kinds of other things. So Gitika said that she had fibroids.
Mm.
Okay. and so here fibroids from our perspective is a kapha condition, which so kapha is anything that grows is solid.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so it grows. And so it's a kapha condition, which we need to reduce, but it's also hampering vata, which is about movement. So, so from an Ayurvedic perspective, this is where I would be looking at. And if it's in the reproductive system, these fibroid type kapha things are going to be throughout the body. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. So, what else do we all know grows in the body that most of us are super scared of, right? We're looking at tumors, right?
Yeah.
Some are cancerous, some are not cancerous, and this is where it gets really interesting. So anyone who had, so it doesn't mean that there's cancer, that's not at all what I want to state, but watching for tumors or smaller growths throughout the body is what's necessary. And what we need to do is we need to keep an eye on kapha. Okay, so which brings us back to Rihanna's issue of kapha, which is fungal. You know, it's it's very easy to bring them into these three categories for me. So
Yeah.
so we want to reduce, we want to look at how kapha grows if there's too much cold in the body. We want if there's too much stagnation. I'm using your terms.
Yeah, but
Only
that's common
because
stagnation. Or we love to talk about dampness, this kind of
dampness,
heaviness,
right?
dampness in the body. Yeah.
Which are the qualities, I'm talking in terms of qualities of vata, pitta, and kapha.
Yeah.
So we're looking at those things and where it's moved out of the body. So in general, kapha's home is in the lungs. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that, so we start in that area.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that the blood is flowing and all of the water channels are flowing properly.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Do people have any more questions about menopause, perimenopause, preparing for perimenopause? Bringing us back to where we being circularly round.
I don't know. Okay, let's see if I missed anything. Sue earlier on said she's glad that she's here, been exposed to many different systems. Love how we're bringing these together. Only wish Western medicine would incorporate some of these ancient learnings as well. And they sort of are.
Yeah, in bits and pieces they are. There's sort of little bits of it emerge. But as you said, it's a very medicalized and I think a very body focused. And the other side, as I said earlier, this is also a journey of our emotions and a journey of our soul. And we never talk about the soul in allopathic medicine. That got cut off and was something to do with religion over here. But we see that as integral to who we are and how we show up in the world and our underlying health and our need to nurture. The soul is as important in our practices as anything to do with the body or even the mind. Certainly, and every Qigong practice has a soul component to it, even though you think we're nicely moving our arms around or whatever people see us doing, they are working on the body, on the mind, and on the soul.
And this is where English is lacking in nuance.
because we have many souls. We have the soul and we have many souls.
We have soul, we have many souls, we have spirit, we have all of those things, and the mind. So yeah, we're always working on the mind. The soul piece, as far as Ayurveda is concerned, is somewhat separated. And the
Mm.
reason for the separation is because Ayurveda is it is like the last of the knowledge sciences. It comes in much later. And so anything having to do with the soul, we've already addressed in other places. So it's
Yeah.
like no need to deal with it here. The same is true for is so they expect, so a lot of the practices that I offer people we have to bring in that soul component because it's not part of the Western model. We think that
Yeah.
it belongs in a church or
Yes.
on
Yeah.
a
So,
mat or
yeah.
but it really is that, and to assist and for those people who don't feel comfortable with soul spirit because they've had upbringing that was harsh in regards to that, then we look at the mind, and the mind is also, because we can't really, from my perspective, you can't really work on the soul to change it because it's already perfect,
It's there.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's perfect. We don't need to work it. It's there. We don't need to do anything with it. But the mind and consciousness, now that we can work with. And
Yes.
that is the connection point
Mm.
between all of these things.
Absolutely. Or as we might talk about it, the emotions, because the emotions can definitely be a expression of the soul. As the soul is there and it lives in different parts of our bodies, have different parts of the soul. Very, very complicated stuff for this kind of conversation.
Okay.
But we can work through our emotions to help
Yes.
us on a soul level, which is also about working with our mind in many ways.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of words,
Yeah,
just words,
okay.
because I always speak about intelligence of the body, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, and each part has its own intelligence,
it does.
which is kind of like that soul piece. Um,
Mm.
Gitika, you are not monopolizing our time.
She is not. We love having you here. We love
We
that.
appreciate you bringing this up. And Sue also said that she has friends in the Southwest who've done a ceremony and burial of their uterus and found that very healing.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, that's that brings in that soul piece, because anytime we take a piece of our body away, we need to have something that has closure to it. Anytime we amputate anything, or even any sort of dream that we may have had, grieving the youth is a thing, and that's fine. You can grieve youth, but you don't have to go backwards into it.
No.
You can say, okay, so here I am, here I was. This is what the body was. These are what my thoughts were. These are what I thought my life would be like. So let's grieve that, and let's have a ceremony to bury, burn,
Yeah.
leave on a mountaintop for vultures to take away,
Mm.
whatever ceremony you want to do, you do that. And that closure, it's like closing your door. It's like,
Mm.
okay, so this is done, it's part of me, and now I can move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I mean, some of the practices in Chinese medicine, some of the Qigong practices are about allowing our past experiences, our past self to come forth and to be released in balance between heaven and earth, both the positive and the negative, before we allow the new feelings to be brought forth. And we do that in some of the practice I teach, which is called the Lotus Rises. And that is directly about releasing those soul experiences, the emotions, things that have happened, so that we can then move forward in a very new and heart-centered way.
Hmm. Hmm. So Gitika just said that she had to deal with the emotional soul part of having a hysterectomy. She had to deal with it herself in meditation and acceptance. And I want to bring that back to postpartum care, which is has a huge effect. Again, that too, that emotional piece of having transformed your body, having you've grown a part of your body, and then it separates into its own being and comes out, right? And so there's always this piece of having a little bit of grief around that,
Yeah.
have and so this is where you also want to do a lot of care, um,
Yes.
in terms of the soul, your soul, and the fact that you're no longer solitary in and of itself. And then once we come back to postmenopause, you're solitary again.
You are. And as we said, this is the journey then we are on this journey to the soul. And I think that's when we recognize that even then we are also on stages, but they're not as defined as when we're younger. They're bigger parts of time. We move, we don't suddenly just become wise elders. We sort of move through those stages. As
What
well.
you
So I
mean at
think that's
52? I'm not 52, but at 52, I thought I would be a wise elder. Uh, Far from.
no,
Um,
no, far from it. I think it's 65. I might be getting a glimpse of it. Just a tiny start of where it might begin, which I think
yeah.
is much more as we said, as the body fades, the soul grows, and we move into a whole new life. And in some ways, we meet our inner child and become the circle of life and whole again.
And that's what I really love about how you describe menopause as the second spring, rather than second what is it? No, what teenage? What adolescence? Yeah,
Adolescence, yeah.
ridiculous statement as far as I'm concerned. Um, but second spring, we often think in terms of seasons, and we think that we're going into fall and winter, and it's so not true.
No.
It is a second spring. So in Ayurveda, there is this thing called, and it has to do with astrology. So at the age of 60, there's this huge ceremony that you have. And it's like a rebirthing because all of your
Oh,
planets have reset at the age of
oh wow.
60 to when you were born. So
Yes.
so
Yeah.
it's this giant reset. So
Yeah.
it's like that second spring because spring is really about rebirth, and in the beginning of that air time we're really super fragile,
Mm. Mm.
and we've built ourselves to be strong and to plow through life, but we're really super fragile in
Yeah.
terms of there's a lot of newness. There's so
Mm.
much out there, and we're beginning to explore our inner selves rather
Yes.
than our outer selves. So not only are we so many of us go inward and
Mm.
we stop dealing with the outer world. We feel more sensitive. We are hypersensitive because we're freshly born. We've had this 60 years of experience.
but
and
we're being
and
born again
and,
to something new. Yeah.
and now we're being born again with the same
Mhm.
circumstances, karmic circumstances, but with experience. And now that's where potentially the wisdom comes along.
It
I don't know.
does.
This is a theory that I'm just.
Yeah.
Uh,
And Sue has said I'm 78 and still working on it. I hear you.
there is a powerhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love it.
she's
Love
amazing.
it.
Okay, so if no one has any other questions, um, is there anything you're working on? And how could people work with you beyond um, subscribing to your Substack?
Subscribe. At the moment, I'm not teaching online my qigong, but that may re-emerge. That may be a reg. For those of you know, I'm halfway moving. You know, when I get my house sold, and then things will come back to some normality. But do subscribe, follow me on here. That's the thing to do. Because I just love, and I'd love to know what challenges people have, what things they'd like to learn more about, because that helps me to be more tailored to where you're, because it's easy to go into the world of Chinese medicine and get totally excited about it on your own terms. But yes, and then I will be coming back to teaching, hopefully more videos and stuff on the women's qigong, because that's what I'd like to share out here in the world. Beautiful practices designed for our bodies and our lifestyle and
I love that.
life stages.
Love
Yeah.
that. Because, yeah, our bodies are different. Our center of balance are different. Not a Qigong person, but former yoga studio and teacher. I've got, uh, if you want to work with me, I'm a practitioner of Ayurveda, doctor of Ayurveda. I work with people one-to-one consultations. And I've discovered that many people are confused about the doshas because they go online, they take these tests, and the tests on their own are confusing, and then the outcomes could be confusing. And
Mm.
like you, where things change, this is where Chinese medicine and Ayurveda kind of work together, because you're
Yeah.
always talking yin and yang, and we're talking prakriti and purusha, which is male and female. But the prakriti is also your balance of doshas from the time of birth, although some people say that it's from the time of conception. Can you imagine how difficult it is to figure that one out? Especially when many people are conceived in interesting ways. Uh, anyhow, so what I've done is I've created a a um,
Nice.
a
Yeah.
dosha assessment
Mhm.
specifically for perimenopause, because your doshas will change. So you can read all about it on my Substack. So if you're interested in that, you're more than welcome to do that. And definitely subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Let's see if we can get
Yeah.
both of these. Um,
Get them back up again. Yes, do. Absolutely. Subscribe. We're both right a lot. And Chitra's even bigger on putting great notes out there on aspects of menopause from Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine. I hope we put it out in ways that people also understand in Western layman terms, because it's easy for us to be lost, but we need it to be that you guys can hook into it and understand and bring some of those day-to-day practices, because they're really important. The day-to-day things we do, how we eat, how we move, how we rest and care for ourselves throughout this journey.
Gitika, you have our blessings to do a great introduction to Ayurveda class.
Oh,
So next week, same time, same place.
Absolutely.
Arts
Same
and
time,
Arts
same
of
place. Who
Menopause.
knows? We will be talking about other things. We have a list. We can talk about so much, but we're so grateful that so many people joined us
Yes.
and stayed here. We thank you so much for that.
And
Means a
we'll
lot.
probably be putting out, I am so happy that you decided to join. I'm so, Rhiannon, we will make sure that we have a recording of this. And if
Yes.
you're not on time, don't stress yourself out. We'll be
Yes.
here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just think of questions. I think that
Yeah.
I would love to have more questions beyond our
Yeah.
topics.
Absolutely. So ask us, like we say, ask me anything, ask us anything, because this is our passion area, and we're here to help you from
And
the heart.
part of what it is with menopause that I've discovered is that the more I put Ayurvedic principles into menopause, into women's experiences, because that's really the
Mm.
challenge, is to hear what those experiences are, and then this whole understanding of menopause can blossom, and we can share. It takes a village. Women are not meant to do this on their own. So
No,
any sort of questions just brings up our knowledge of the deeper principles, rather than there's a pill for that kind of situation, or
yeah,
there's a movement for that. So bring your questions if you remember.
yeah. We appreciate you and we look forward to seeing you. Yeah.
Appreciate you too. Okay, so I guess that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you. Thank you,
how do we end
everyone.
it? Oh, I have to end it here on the phone,
You do.
not
You
on the
have to end it
computer.
here on the phone, not on the computer. Bye, everyone.
Bye.